Hi, I'm Paul Secor, the Vice President for Philanthropy for the Mental Health Association of Central Florida. And I'm very excited today because we're rolling out our third video in our Back to School series, which is all about helping your child get the proper sleep. And to help us uncover that topic and dive into it is Dr. Lisa Spector, who is the Chief of Developmental Behavioral Pediatrics at Nemours Children's Health. Dr. Spector, thank you for being with us again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here talking about my favorite topic, sleep.
Sleep. Hey, who doesn't like sleep, right? So
Right.
I guess the first question I have for you is, we see for adults, we always hear, the 8 hours of sleep per day. I think it's a challenge for parents to know, as their children are in different age groups, what is the proper amount of sleep per hours they should be getting each night?
Yeah, it varies for age groups. So the infants and toddlers require a lot more. But once you get to school age, so 6 to 13 years of age, generally they should get between 9 to 12 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. And then once you hit 14 to 17 years of age, they should get between 8 to 10 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. And then for adults, yes, it's like that 7 to 8 hour of sleep every night.
The ideal number, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a lot more. So even with teenagers, that's a lot more than I would have expected. But I guess it makes sense because they're growing at the same time. Speaking of teenagers, I know one of the challenge a lot of parents have is the teenagers start out the summer and they stay up 1 hour later the first week and then an hour later the next week. And by the end of the summer, your child's sometimes almost nocturnal at that point. And now you've got to flip it back to the school year and the normal times. How do you do that? How do you make that switch efficiently and get them on the right track?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think many of us experience that with our adolescents or pre-adolescents, and it's pretty common for their sleep cycle to get pushed back, which also makes it challenging because they often have school the first thing in the morning of all the grades, right? So
Yes.
early. And I think that's changing maybe in 2 years or so for the state of Florida, which will be great. But yeah, it's hard to change it. So usually you want to start 2 weeks before school starts. So if we haven't done it at this point in time, we're probably in the midst of it for many of the families and adolescents out there right now, since we're in almost through the second week of school starting. But generally, start 2 weeks before school starts. You can have, like you were mentioning, starting exposure to sunlight, having intense exposure to sunlight can help restart your clock, as well as using supplements to help with sleep aids. Supplements or sleep aids, like melatonin, for example, can
Okay.
help us move our sleep cycle a little bit earlier in the evening.
Interesting. Now, I know when going to bed is a big challenge because I think a lot of people don't realize there's the word sleep hygiene or the term sleep hygiene. And so I guess that just refers to, making the best possible environment to get good sleep. Applies to everyone, including children. What are some good examples of setting good sleep hygiene and a good sleep environment, do you think?
Yeah, so the room should have no screens whatsoever in it. So we talk about when kids go to bed, their screens go to bed. And ideally, it's best if their screens go to bed in a different place that's not their bedroom. They can still charge it in the bathroom, right? Or they can still charge it down the
Yeah.
hall or in the kitchen. It's not going to not charge. And some children will say, well, I use it for my alarm. Well, we shockingly have like alarms back in the day that we also have in our rooms that we can use to help us wake up instead of our phones or our tablets or whatever screen in our room. So making sure there's no screens in the bedroom is number one, most important. And then making sure the room is calm and quiet and dark. You don't want to have uh, sounds that fluctuate too much, because once kids
Mm.
fall asleep, sometimes they're more likely to wake up if they hear the changing in sounds. So kids can fall asleep to a sound or an audio book we talk about a lot. That way they're hearing something and it kind of distracts them to help them fall asleep without looking at a screen. Because the screens, when you look at it, it has a blue wavelength of light that when it hits our retina, it tells us to be awake, which people don't realize that. So when they're watching screens before bed, it can keep them from falling asleep just because of the light from the screen.
That's a great point, and I think this kind of segues into one of the other things I wanted to talk about, which was if your child wakes up in the middle of the night, younger children may have nightmares. And of course, children and most everybody a lot of times are getting up at some point in the night to use the bathroom, and the bathroom light can go on and suddenly kind of wake your child up. So what's your advice if you have a child that's waking up in the middle of the night? How do you kind of get them back to sleep efficiently and make sure that they're not too disrupted from their sleep pattern?
Yeah, if it's older children, it's really prompting them to go back to their bedroom, to go back to sleep, and making sure they don't have any access to screens. If a young child wakes up in the middle of the night and they get a hold of a screen and start watching something, again, it's going to keep them awake for the rest of the night. And it makes what was a fluke become a habit. And that's something we
Ah,
don't want to experience.
that's true. And
Sometimes
what's your
laying
opinion?
down with them. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, what's your opinion on like night lights and things like that? Are those good too to
Yeah,
put in place?
night lights can be helpful for many children who are scared of the dark as well. Sometimes you have a night light that starts in the beginning of the night and it turns off after they fall asleep.
Mm,
Can be helpful as well. Some kids need it throughout the whole time while they're sleeping because if they wake up and they see it at different darkness, they become scared and then seek out their caregiver.
gotcha. That makes sense. So, I know a lot of this discussion on sleep, it's really interesting from a cultural standpoint. There's kind of a big emphasis, I think, to almost take pride in how little sleep you can get. And, I can function on this much sleep, like some people say I can function on 4 hours sleep. And there's kind of this hustle culture. And so, saying that you sleep 9 hours a day, is looked down upon sometimes. What are your thoughts on, you know, culturally, why is sleep so important, from a standpoint of mental health and physical health, and how do we fight that kind of stigmatism, I guess, in a way, with those that want to get that sleep or should be getting that sleep?
Yeah, we did flip the switch, pun intended, right? So we need to get to the place where we're really focusing on getting that high quality sleep. So when we shorten our sleep, the amount of time that we're sleeping, we're spending less time in REM sleep. And REM sleep is our restorative sleep. When we get more REM sleep, we're better able to function during the day. We're better able to pay attention. Our mood is better as well. Our motion regulation to things that are stressful is improved. So it's so important to really value and maybe have a competition about how restful sleep that I'm getting, how much restorative sleep that I'm getting compared to you.
Yeah,
I said
that's true.
before.
We all need to brag, right? We should make that a thing. I'll brag on social media about, I just slept 10 hours, and so it's all right. So anything else we should cover? Any tips for parents in terms of getting their kids, back in the habit of getting good sleep each night, making sure they're up for the good school year and hitting the day on the good foot. Any tips? Any final tips?
Well, I think one, we are role models for our children, right? So what we do, they do. So if they see us falling asleep watching a screen, that's what they're going to want to do too. So it's trying to get back to, book reading or listening to our audiobooks and being good role models for them. Although it's hard because, it's something that we do to relax and unwind at the end of the evening is to watch a screen. But also noting that if we're using melatonin to help with sleep initiation for our children, that if we give somebody melatonin, even ourselves, and we look at a screen, that screen is going to counteract the effect of the melatonin. So it's going to make it pretty much like we didn't give the melatonin. So if we're using melatonin to help kids initiate sleep, the importance is giving the melatonin 30 to 60 minutes before bed and then no screens during that time, and
Okay.
also limiting the amount of melatonin we give. Oftentimes, I hear people giving children like 10 milligrams of melatonin, which is
Wow.
way too much. We want to stick with 1 milligram or less. They actually have shown that the smaller amount of melatonin you give, the more effective it is for children.
Okay.
And the last thing that I wanted to let parents know, in case they don't know, is we're finding there's a bidirectional relationship between sleep and mood disorders.
Mm,
That when we don't get enough sleep, we're more likely to be irritable or irritated, angry, upset, or sad. And that can lead to mood disorders, including depression. And when people are depressed, they also have a disruption in their sleep. So it's a bi-directional relationship. So if we can make sure we're getting plenty of sleep and we're competing about how many restful hours we get every night to our colleagues and our peers, then it will help us function better at school academically and improve our overall mood as well.
that's true. It's almost like a chicken and egg syndrome, I think, right? Like, so if you don't get enough sleep, you're more likely to be depressed. And the more depressed you are, the more trouble sleeping you'll have. So,
Exactly.
okay. Well, I think we covered a lot. Thank you so much, Dr. Spector, for giving us all these insights on back to school and sleep. I think it's going to be really helpful for parents.
Thank you.
All right. So if you'd like to watch more videos like this or download our free back to school guide or get daily calendar tips, you can visit mhacf.org. All this content is free and it's available for download. So thank you so much.